The conflict between Israel and Iran did not begin with the Islamic Revolution of 1979. It did not begin with the wars of 1948 or with 20th century European colonialism. It began 4,000 years ago with a decision made by a man named Abraham, a woman named Sarah, and a slave named Hagar. Everything you see in today's headlines, the missiles, the sanctions, the drones, the rhetoric of destruction, has its roots in a text that half the world considers sacred. And what that text says is going to surprise you. What nobody tells you is this: the conflict between Persia and Israel in the Bible is not simply a story of enemies. It is a story of Cyrus the Great being called Messiah by name, and of a woman named Esther saving an entire people from extermination inside the Persian court. This channel goes where the news doesn't dare. Subscribe now. To understand the biblical origin of this tension, we need to go to the absolute beginning, not the 20th century, not the 1st century, but approximately the 20th century before Christ. Abraham, called Abram in the oldest texts, was a nomad from the region of Ur in present-day Mesopotamia who, according to biblical tradition, received a divine call to emigrate to the land of Canaan. With him went his wife Sarah and his nephew Lot. The divine promise to Abraham was specific and extraordinary. From him would be born a nation as numerous as the stars in the sky and as the sand of the sea. The problem was that Abraham was 75 years old when he received that promise, and Sarah was barren. Genesis chapter 16. Sarah, convinced that God will fulfill his promise, but impatient with how long it is taking, proposes to Abraham a practical and culturally acceptable solution in the world of the ancient Near East. He would take her Egyptian slave Hagar as a concubine. The son born from that union would legally be Sarah's son. Abraham agreed. Hagar conceived. And at that precise point in the biblical narrative, the tension began. Genesis 16 describes with surprising honesty what happened next. When Hagar realized she was pregnant, her mistress was despised in her eyes. Sarah, unable to bear the situation, treated Hagar with such harshness that the slave fled into the desert. In the desert, beside a spring of water, Hagar had an extraordinary encounter. The angel of the Lord spoke to her and said, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" She replied, "I am fleeing from my mistress Sarai." The angel gave her two apparently contradictory orders: return to your mistress and submit to her, and at the same time made her a promise that echoed the one made to Abraham: "I will surely multiply your offspring so that they cannot be numbered." And then came the prophecy about the son who would be born. "Behold, you are pregnant and shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has listened to your affliction. He shall be a wild donkey of a man, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he shall dwell over against all his kinsmen, his hand against everyone, and everyone's hand against him." This description of Ishmael's character and his descendants has been interpreted for centuries as a prophecy about the Arab peoples, including the Arabs of Islam who claim Ishmael as their ancestor through Muhammad. 13 years after Ishmael's birth, when Abraham was 99, God ratified his covenant and announced that Sarah, now 90 years old, would conceive and bear a son. That son would be called Isaac, which in Hebrew means "he laughs," because both Abraham and Sarah had laughed in disbelief when they heard the announcement. The birth of Isaac was the spark that ignited the domestic rivalry to its breaking point. Genesis 21 describes the scene. Sarah sees Ishmael mocking her son Isaac during the weaning feast. Sarah's reaction is immediate and brutal. "Drive out this slave woman and her son, for the son of this slave woman shall not be heir with my son Isaac." Abraham was greatly distressed, but God ordered him to do what Sarah asked, with this promise: "Two through Isaac shall your offspring be named. From the son of the slave woman I will also make a nation, because he is your offspring." Hagar and Ishmael were expelled into the desert with some bread and water. When the water ran out, Hagar left the boy under a shrub and moved away, so as not to see her son die. Again, the angel intervened. Again pointing to water, again promising a nation. 2 sons of Abraham, 2 mothers, 2 expulsions, 2 promises of nations. And from that moment, 2 lines of descent that would march on separate paths. The Iranians today are overwhelmingly Persian, not Arab. They are the descendants of the Achaemenid Empire, which ruled the Near East from the 6th to the 4th century BC. Their language is Farsi, an Indo-European language related to Sanskrit and Greek, completely different from Arabic. Their pre-Islamic history includes Zoroastrianism, Mazdaism, and the great tradition of the Achaemenid kings. In the Hebrew Bible, Persia appears not as Israel's enemy, but in surprisingly positive roles, and also in darker ones. The most striking example of the positive attitude is King Cyrus the Great, Isaiah chapter 44 verse 28 and chapter 45 verse 1. The prophet Isaiah, writing in approximately the 5th century BC, about a century and a half before Cyrus was born, pronounces the name of Cyrus and calls him shepherd and his anointed. The Hebrew word translated as anointed is Mashiach, Messiah. Cyrus of Persia is the only Gentile, the only non-Jew to whom the Hebrew Bible applies this title explicitly and by proper name. Why? Because in 539 BC, Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon exactly as Isaiah had prophesied, and the following year issued the Edict of Cyrus, which allowed all peoples deported by the Babylonians to return to their lands and rebuild their temples. For Jews in Babylonian captivity, Cyrus was not a foreign conqueror. He was the liberator sent by God. The Edict of Cyrus is recorded both in the Book of Ezra and in the Cyrus Cylinder, a 6th century BC clay document preserved at the British Museum, which describes in his own words the religious tolerance policy that made him famous in the ancient world. If this video is showing you a conflict you didn't know about, leave your like, subscribe, and share. Someone you know has been watching the news for years without understanding where any of this really comes from. The Book of Esther begins with a party. King Ahasuerus, identified by most historians with Xerxes I, the Persian king who invaded Greece in the 5th century BC, celebrates a 180-day banquet for the princes and governors of his provinces. The capital is Susa. The palace is magnificent. Wine flows freely. And in a moment of intoxicated euphoria, the king summons his queen Vashti to display herself before his guests. Vashti refuses. This simple act of feminine resistance triggers a constitutional crisis in the Persian Empire. If the queen disobeys the king, what will all the other women of the empire do? The king's advisors resolve the problem swiftly. Vashti is dethroned, and the king needs a new queen. Enter Esther, in Hebrew, Hadassah, a young orphaned Jewish woman raised by her cousin Mordecai in the Babylonian Persian exile. Esther is presented to the king among the candidates, and the king chooses her as his new queen. But there is a secret. Esther has not revealed her Jewish identity. She keeps it by Mordecai's instruction. Here enters the antagonist, Haman, described in the Hebrew text as Haman son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, is elevated by King Ahasuerus to the highest position in the kingdom, above all the princes. All the king's servants bowed down and paid homage to Haman by royal order, all except one, Mordecai the Jew. Mordecai's servants asked him why he disobeyed the king's order. He replied that he was a Jew and would not bow down. When Haman found out, he did not consider it sufficient to punish only Mordecai. The text says with a precision that makes your skin crawl, Haman sought to destroy all the Jews who were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, the people of Mordecai. Haman went to the king and formulated the proposal with the coldest words in the book. There is a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they do not keep the king's laws, so that it is not to the king's profit to tolerate them. If it please the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed. The king extended his signet ring to Haman. The order was issued. The day of extermination was set by lot. In Hebrew, Pur, from which comes the name of the feast of Purim. It would be the 13th day of the month of Adar. Mordecai tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and cried out at the king's gate. He sent a message to Esther. Do not think that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Esther's response is one of the most dramatic moments of courage in all ancient literature. She knows that going to the king without being summoned is a protocol violation punishable by death, and still she responds, "Go, gather all the Jews to be found in Susa, and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." The story of Esther. The king who doesn't know his queen is Jewish, the favorite who seeks to exterminate her, the unsolicited audience, the banquet, the final denunciation, ends with Haman hanged on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai, and with the Jews of the empire authorized to defend themselves. Let's return to Haman. The Hebrew text describes him as the Agagite. This identification is not decorative. It is theological and genealogical. The Agagites were descendants of Agag, king of Amalek, and Amalek, according to the biblical genealogy of Genesis, was a grandson of Esau. Esau is the twin brother of Jacob. Jacob is the patriarch whose 12 sons founded the 12 tribes of Israel. Esau and Jacob were the sons of Isaac, the son of Abraham and Sarah. The rivalry between Esau and Jacob began literally in their mother Rebekah's womb. The text says the two were struggling within her, and continued throughout their lives. Esau sold his birthright to Jacob for a bowl of lentils. Jacob deceived his father Isaac to receive the blessing that belonged to Esau. Esau swore to kill Jacob. Jacob fled. Decades later, they were reconciled, but the lines of their descendants followed separate paths. The first king of Israel, Saul, was rejected by God precisely because he did not completely exterminate the Amalekites as he had been commanded, and the survivor whose line endured, according to rabbinic genealogy, is the same one that will produce, centuries later, Haman the Agagite. The Islamic Revolution of 1979 brought this identity to the extreme. Iran became an Islamic theocratic republic under the concept of velayat faqih, the governance of the Islamic jurist, with Imam Khomeini as supreme leader. And since then, hostility toward Israel has become state policy, elevated to the rank of religious obligation. Both the Messianic Judaism underlying Israel's religious Zionism and the Twelver Shi'ism of Iran's Islamic Republic have eschatological visions that have profoundly shaped attitudes toward the current conflict. From the Iranian side, there is a current within Iranian Shi'ism, especially active during Ahmadinejad's presidency in the 2000s, that believes the conditions for the Mahdi's return can be accelerated by human actions, including confrontation with oppressor powers. This does not represent the opinion of all Shia Muslims or all Iranians. Iranian society is profoundly diverse, but it is the ideology that has informed the official policy of the Islamic Republic since 1979. If this video opened a door you didn't know existed, subscribe, activate the bell, and leave in the comments the question this video generated for you. See you in the next one.